Hello, everyone. I'm Alex.
And I'm Dylan.
You're not Andy anymore?
No.
Okay.
I reverted back. Thank
Congrats. That's a big moment in anybody's life. We don't have a super structured video. We just want to talk about handhelds. I'd say definitely in the grand scheme of life, I am more of a handheld gamer than a console gamer. Would you agree with that statement?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, I play my handhelds more. I think, though, there's a distinction I want to make right at the beginning about handheld portable gaming. There's two tiers to it. There's the stuff you can fit in your pocket and kind of like whip out, even if you're just like walking on a sidewalk. You know, you can play your Game Boy. And then there's like the Switch caliber of stuff where it's like you can play it lying in bed, but you're not realistically taking it with you. I mean, if you got cargo pants or something, they fit in those pockets like nothing. But still, it's like it's unsightly to whip out a Nintendo Switch.
Absolutely. I'd be concerned if somebody pulled out their Switch just out of nowhere.
I think the way we're going to start this is just talking about the consoles we have with us.
Yeah.
If you want to introduce the people to yours.
Okay, so right here I have the original Game Boy from 1989, the DMG. Got that beautiful puke green screen. But some things I really like about this is very big and bulky. Like, the buttons feel nice, they're nice and spaced out, and the speaker's actually very loud. I have Pokemon in there right now. But it's just mind-blowing to think about how this started, like, so many, like, genres of handheld games. Like, this is kind of like where it started also. I think this one's very important.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you have, like, the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Color, but then next you have the Game Boy Advance. This is mine. It's modded. It has an IPS screen because the original model didn't have a backlight or no light or anything, so you can adjust the brightness. Mine has googly eyes on it. And then you have the Game Boy Advance SP, the first clamshell design, kind of similar to the DS, and mine's the SpongeBob one. Not an original, but my personal favorite is the Game Boy Micro. It's very small, very micro. The speaker on it's very good, as you can kind of hear. You can adjust the brightness on it. It's a very underrated console and one of my favorites because it's. Alex was talking about like portable gaming, like just taking out a Switch. You take this out, nobody's gonna even notice.
Yeah, it can be in like your shirt pocket.
Exactly, and I've done that before. And then last but not least, one of my favorite looking screens is the DSi Lite, or the DSi XL, I should say. Mine's modded, so it takes a second to boot up, but
That's illegal.
Don't tell them. Don't tell Nintendo. But yeah, so those are my favorite handhelds. So if you want to share yours, Alex.
Well, first, realistically, which of the Game Boys is your go-to?
I would honestly say the original Advance because it plays both Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, all that. It's not as cramped up as the SP. You have more space. Big shoulder buttons compared to these little tiny ones. But obviously the originals aren't backlit, so my modded one is my go-to. I do like if I'm just going to play a Game Boy Advance game, I do like the Micro because it's cool. But yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the original Game Boy Advance definitely has my favorite form factor out of any of the Game Boys. And I had one, but it was not modded. So I sold it when I got my SP because those screens are hard to return to. But going through the ones I brought with me, these are not all of my handhelds, and I'll shout out the important ones later. But I figured I'd at least bring my 3 pink ones. So we got the pink Game Boy Advance SP. This one's a really nice pink. Out of all my pink consoles, I think it's probably my favorite one. I have a pink PS2 also that has kind of a similar color to it. Like, it's almost, in certain lights you don't really see it, but it's nice, it's subtle, it's like kind of pastel, and I love the SP. I mean, the form factor is a little bit rough compared to the other Game Boys, like we were saying, but when you can play Game Boy games on it, it doesn't matter. It's all sick. And then I've had this forever, not like probably as long as some people have had their DS Lites, but 2.5 years probably. It's the pink DS Lite. I used to use this a lot more before I had like a reliable Game Boy. I'd play Game Boy Advance games on this, but in modern day, for DS games, I usually play my 3DS, and then for Game Boy Advance games, I usually use my SP. So this is kind of just a display piece at this point, but golly, is it beautiful. All right, and then my least favorite pink console, but the one I play the most for sure, is this not the DS Lite, the Switch Lite. It's coral. It's not pink. So in a vacuum, I do like the color that it is, but just next to like the more pastel pinks that the other consoles are, it bothers me. But I play this a ton. It's a little bit lighter than a regular Switch, which I also have a regular Switch, but I pretty much just keep that in the dock all the time. And that genuinely, it sounds silly because it's probably like 1 or 2 grams lighter, but it does make a difference. Like, it's so much nicer to hold. It's just a lot slimmer and a lot nicer feeling on your hands. Good form factor. And then the only console that I deemed important enough to be here, even though it isn't pink.
You can spray paint it.
I won't, probably. Is the Gamegear. I just got this one recently, and it has blown me out of the proverbial water so far. I've been playing a ton of Dragon Crystal. Super fun little roguelike on it. I have a game called Magical Puzzle Popple, which is like a puzzle action platformer type of game that's super fun. And then, of course, I played some Columns on it, which is Columns. It's solid. There is a red Coca-Cola Game Gear that only existed in Japan. But if you guys have if you guys are looking for a new dream console, maybe it should be the red Coca-Cola Game Gear, because that's just a fun combination of things. So yeah, that's it for the consoles I brought with me.
I think one thing I want to talk about is, like, I guess over the past few years, like, how much modding plays a role into like these old consoles. Because I remember getting this Game Boy when I was in 8th grade. I got this on eBay broken for $10, and I was able to fix it. And that was just like the most mind-blowing thing ever. And obviously it's grown because you used to be able to get these used consoles for super cheap. Like, you used to be able to get like a regular GBA for like $30, and now people are selling them unmodded for $60 because so many people are finding out about these mods. Because before they would just backlight the screens themselves, but now people are using the IPS screen technology, and it's just ramped up because there's just such like a huge community and like drive to want to like improve this old hardware, because it's a matter of how cool it is and the nostalgia too. And I think that's something that's really cool with handheld gaming, that you can't really see something similar like that to console gaming, because obviously you use the TV. Like, maybe like little mods to the console themselves, but like for a lot of people this is their preferred form factor, just grabbing it on the go and playing it. And that's one of the reasons why I like the portable gaming.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've pretty much completely avoided modding consoles. I mean, I've hacked a 3DS in my day, but beyond that, I haven't really... Like, my Game Gear still has its original screen, which is probably the biggest stretch for, like, usability. But there were a few months there where I was genuinely trying to attempt to use a Game Boy Advance with a worm light. I was just living that life. Because I don't know, I totally get the compulsion to upgrade the screens, and I think there is a lot of use in it. And there are days where I wish my Game Boy Advance SP had a form factor that wasn't the Game Boy Advance SP's form factor. But I don't know. I think there's something to it, just keeping them all original and experiencing them how people used to. Even if that isn't the most convenient way, I guess my logic is, playing... Like, these are all consoles that are probably the easiest to emulate out of any consoles, I'd say. So it's like, it already could be more... convenient. I don't know if I'll leave in Andy's interjection, but he mentioned like the analog pocket. Like, realistically, if my goal is to just have a nice form factor and play games portably on a little portable handheld, I feel like something like that probably covers my base better than like a SP or something, or not an SP, like a Game Boy Color or something that was modded. But obviously, you'll never get that puke green unless you have an original Game Boy. So there is something to that.
Or a Super Game Boy.
That's true.
If you think about it, like, a lot of games, like, they were, like, because at first, like, with the Game Boy, like, a lot of the game, not all of them, but, like, a large portion of the Game Boy games were just, like, watered-down ports of, like, NES and Super NES games. I really think it was Pokemon that was, like, the first game that was only on handhelds that really blew up, because if you think about it, the original Red and Blue came out at, like, the tail end of the lifespan of the original Game Boy, and it's, like, one of the best-selling games on the Game Boy, and it's, like... And just, like, the legacy it's created to, like, all these games are, like, exclusive to, like, handheld game. Like, another thing I think of are, like, the Metroidvania, Castlevania games. Aside from Symphony of the Night, all of them are handheld, whether on the Game Boy Advance or the DS. So I'd really just created like the drive to not so much make a game look super incredible, like with advanced graphics, but also like the art of seeing it in a handheld. Like seeing it on the TV is one thing, but seeing like a game look great just in your hand is like, it gives you like such a great feeling. And obviously with like our DS is like experimenting with the dual screens, like it's just, if you think about it, like if you look at like what's the most like I guess the Switch, like going from this to this is just like, it's crazy how far they've come. Because like with graphics, I feel like they've kind of reached like a plateau where it's like, if you look at PS4 and PS5 graphics, they're pretty similar.
How dare you? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, they're the same.
And then if you look at like handheld, is like, I guess seeing like Switch games look good on the TV and then in like the form factor of handheld is just, it's just kind of crazy how far the technology's come.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like the Switch 2 that Andy and I famously reacted to. Most likely will have the power of a PS4, and given that every game still comes out on the PS4 pretty much, like we're like maybe 3 or 4 years away from just there being no difference between a handheld console and a at-home console besides the form factor. And that'll be cool, I guess. Maybe it'll have drawbacks. I'm sure it will somehow, like everything does. But the other thing I wanted to say was you mentioning like games made specifically for handheld. I think in the modern day, like already even like there's so many games that come out on the PS4, the PS5, and the Switch, and like that is a thing I'll take into account. Like maybe it's a super like story-driven JRPG, or like a I don't know, like a fighting game or something where there's just reasons I'd want to play it on a big screen on a TV consistently. I'll probably get those types of games for my PS4 or my PS5. But if it's like kind of a farming game or like a puzzle game or maybe a JRPG that's a little more like laid back or less focused on the story, that I'm getting for my Switch because I want to play those like handheld games where you just pick them up, play them for a bit, put them back down, rinse and repeat. And obviously that's not always how it works out. Like if I'm playing Pokemon or some other game on my handheld that I really like, I can do a long gaming session when I have the time. Am I right? But like there is definitely just like a different psychology that goes into playing a game on a handheld versus a console. Yeah, definitely. It's just, I feel like it's a little bit more special on the handheld, but they're both great. Yeah, it's a little more like, I guess, intimate in a way. I think one that really captures this is Super Mario Land 2 on the Game Boy. I feel like that, there was obviously one Super Mario Land game that came up before it that is famously mid. But Super Mario Land 2, are you going to defend Super Mario Land 1?
Not
Is that
now.
what's happening? No, it's not the time for that.
No.
But Super Mario Land 2 really feels like Nintendo like nailing that handheld formula with a Mario game. Like the levels are a lot shorter. There's like a thing in the middle that you can restart from if you die. You can do the levels in any order, so you can kind of explore more and run around. It saves your progress, which that's a huge thing, and I feel like it became more of a thing quicker on handhelds than it did on home consoles.
That's true.
For some reason. So it's just that's an example of a game that like kind of figured out the differences between handheld and console gaming and really took advantage of it.
I think another game that's kind of similar to that is the original Donkey Kong on the Game Boy, where the first 4 levels are just like the ones from the arcade, kind of like a shallower version, and then once you beat that, there's like 100 new levels with like a bunch of different like puzzles and challenges. Like I feel like in the beginning of the Game Boy era, there was still kind of like because they were just new to the technology, but like once they went on, that's when they started to make some really good games. Like the Zelda games, obviously Link's Awakening is a classic. It's like Alex was saying, it's like a smaller like scale in terms of like comparing like Mario Land 2 to Mario World, but like similar with Zelda, like Link's Awakening isn't like as grand scale as Link to the Past, but still a great game. And we went on to get the Oracle games on the Game Boy Color, and it's really cool to see how they kind of learned their way around making a handheld game.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
And I wanna give a shout out to the consoles I did not bring, which are the PSP and the PS Vita. No shade to Sony's handheld. I mean, a little shade because they kind of messed it up, especially with the PS Vita. But those consoles are cool. To be honest, I have been tracking every game I've played since November of 2023. There are 2 consoles I have not played at all in that time that I own. One of them is the original Xbox. I have logged a total of 0 hours on it. And the other one is the PS Vita. So if Andy was here, he'd probably be crying. But I really have overlooked that console. But I have some pretty good games for it. Some pretty cool stuff. A lot of weird indie games get released on the PS Vita for some reason. I don't know what that movement was about, but that was happening. So I have a bunch of those. And I'm excited to dive in. I just haven't. But the PSP, we're close. We're close friends. I'm close friends with the PlayStation Portable. It was way ahead of its time, like so much. It was almost as powerful as a PS2, and it came out in like 2005 or something, and that's crazy for a handheld at that time. It could play music, it could play movies, it could play Click featuring Adam Sandler, which is a huge thing. It could play Family Guy.
I was just gonna say Family Guy.
We live watched Family Guy on the PSP one time. It was awesome. But that console was just trying to do so much. There's a lot of games I genuinely love on it, like Loco Roco is super fun, super quirky little platformer. There's a lot good, like the Need for Speed ports on the PSP for some reason are super awesome, especially like Most Wanted. Super great little racing game. They got the Hot Shots Golf and Hot Shots Tennis games. I love the PSP. Its loading times do suck. That is something that you have to take into account. It's loading a disc like an old Windows computer from like the 1980s would load a floppy disk or something. I don't know if those timelines work out. Don't yell at me if I'm wrong. But it takes a long time to load things, and that is something to factor into the experience of playing it. But genuinely, I think the PSP has a library that is really worth exploring if you haven't yet. It's a super fun console.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really speak too much on it since I've never owned the PSP or Vita.
Play Loco Roco right
I will.
now. Okay. The SpongeBob SP, I'm not big on like having multiple versions of the same console, just because I want to spend all my money on games.
Yeah.
But the SpongeBob SP, I would have room to have one of those and a pink SP. Those 2 are just things I really want. There's a Seattle Mariners DS Lite, I think. So if you're into baseball and you're from Washington and you want a DS Lite, I think it's like $400 on eBay.
But there you go.
So pick that up.
Exactly.
But yeah, that is all I think I have to say. Handhelds are super cool. And it's a special experience to play them.
I would say, first of all, like and subscribe. Second of all,
our Patreon.
Yes, join the Patreon. And then I would say, comment down below what your favorite handheld is and why. I know I sound like a broken record saying that, but it is genuinely interesting to see what people's favorites are. Like,
yes,
my favorite is the Game Boy Micro because I think it's so cool. And what would you say your favorite is?
My favorite, I mean, boringly, I have to say the Switch, just because it's the one I play the most.
Still a good answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a huge soft spot for the 3DS, which we haven't mentioned once in this video. 3DS, Nintendo 3DS.
It's awesome.
It's sick.
Very easily alter it, so it's even better.
That's true. I played that a ton growing up, so I have a soft spot for that.
Same here.
Game Boy Advance is cool. Everyone buy a Gamegear. You're missing out. Don't listen to the haters talking about its battery life. Just buy a lot of batteries. It's fine.
There you go.
So yeah, thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Like and subscribe. Join our Patreon. Check out Ratio Man's channel. It's a great place full of cinema, I would say.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for watching.
Thank you.